At the beginning of this story, we see a servant named Hans who works at a merchant's shop. One morning when he wakes up, he begins to miss his home. He takes an old painting of his house and goes to the merchant. Hans tells the merchant that he misses his home very much. He has been working for the merchant for the past 7 years and now wants to return to his home by the seaside. He further says that his old mother must be waiting for him. The merchant feels sad to hear this because Hans was a very honest and hardworking boy. He had been managing all of the merchant's business. The merchant tells Hans that if he is facing any trouble or if someone is bothering him, he will immediately solve the problem. But Hans says that he has grown tired of this work and just wants to go home and rest. Then the merchant takes out a key from a box and opens his large chest. He takes out a heavy piece of gold from the chest and gives it to Hans, saying that with this, he can live comfortably for the rest of his life. Hans thanks the merchant and sets off toward his home with the gold. Since the piece of gold is heavy, Hans ties it in a cloth, hangs it over his shoulder, and walks along the road singing. He crosses a deep forest and then arrives at a village. In the village, he meets a merchant named Knudsen and his daughter Elizabeth. They often buy goods from distant places and sell them elsewhere for profit. Today, too, they are setting out from their home with lots of goods for trade. Hans goes to them and tells Elizabeth that he also used to work for a merchant, but now he has left that job and is going back home. He also gives her some advice about selling goods, such as showing attractive items to customers at first to draw their interest in buying. Then Hans picks up the piece of gold wrapped in cloth and starts walking again. Just then, Elizabeth asks him what is inside the cloth. Hans cheerfully tells her that it is the reward for his 7 years of hard work, given to him by his master. As soon as Elizabeth sees the piece of gold, she is astonished and says that Hans is a very rich man now and can fulfill all his needs. Hans smiles and replies that he himself does not even know what he will do with it, and saying this, he moves on. When Elizabeth tells her father Knudsen about the piece of gold, Knudsen bursts out laughing and says that Hans could never have such an expensive piece of gold. Hans continues alone toward his destination, so he starts singing again. Just then, Knudsen and his daughter Elizabeth pass by in their horse cart. Elizabeth tells her father that Hans really does have gold and that it must weigh at least 40 kilograms. Hearing this, Knudsen thinks to himself that if this is true, Hans must be the richest man in the village and must have more wealth than they do. Meanwhile, Hans feels a bit tired and sits down on a stone to rest. Just then, a man riding a horse passes by. The horseman stops when he sees Hans and says that horse riding is the best thing in the world because a horse moves quickly without stumbling and carries no burden. The horseman adds that riding it makes him feel like a prince. Hans tells him that he has a heavy piece of gold and is finding it hard to carry. His shoulder hurts from the weight. When the horseman sees the piece of gold, greed fills his eyes, and he comes up with a trick to get the gold from Hans. He tells Hans that his horse is very fast and can take him to his destination in no time. Hans becomes happy hearing this and offers to exchange his gold for the horse. Thus Hans falls for the horseman's words and the deal is made. The horseman gives him the horse and leaves with the gold. Hans mounts the horse and moves toward his destination, soon passing by Knudsen and Elizabeth's carriage. Elizabeth sees him riding the horse and tells her father that he no longer has the piece of gold. Meanwhile, Hans is moving ahead on the horse when suddenly it stops. Hans tries to make the horse move forward, and in the process, the horse gets angry and starts running fast, carrying Hans along. Hans tries hard to stop the horse, but it takes him near a cowshed and throws him off, leaving him unconscious. When Hans opens his eyes, a farmer comes there with his horse. The farmer tells Hans that his horse has killed 5 of his cows. Hearing this, Hans gets frightened and says that the horse went out of control. Now Hans becomes afraid to ride the horse again and tells the farmer that he will never sit on it. The farmer then says that Hans simply doesn't know how to ride and that the horse is actually very good. Just then, a cow comes near Hans, and he tells the farmer that he wants to exchange the horse for the cow. He thinks that the cow can walk calmly, he can drink its milk, and also make cheese and butter from it. Hearing this, the farmer is surprised because the horse is much more valuable than the cow. So the farmer happily agrees to the deal and takes the horse away. Hans now happily walks away with his cow and soon reaches a nearby village. In the village, Knudsen and Elizabeth are already there, because their carriage had broken down. Due to the heat, Elizabeth's father starts feeling unwell, so she advises him to rest. Just then, Hans arrives there with his cow. Elizabeth runs to him, laughing, and says that this is the third time they are meeting. Then she asks him about the gold. Hans smiles and says that he had traded the gold for a horse and later exchanged the horse for this cow. Elizabeth doesn't believe him and says that he is trying to fool her and has probably hidden the gold somewhere. But Hans assures her that all he has left is this cow. Elizabeth then says that the gold was far more valuable than the cow and that he has made a terrible deal. Hans then explains that the gold wasn't valuable to him, even if it was precious to others. He says he felt happy when he got the horse, and now he feels happy to have the cow. He adds that he wants to live a simple life, and that the more we complicate our lives, the more troubles we create. Hearing this, Elizabeth starts laughing and thinks that this boy is so simple-hearted. After that, Hans invites Elizabeth to celebrate his cow purchase, and they both go to a nearby hotel. Then Knudsen begins loading the goods back into the carriage, but he doesn't see Elizabeth anywhere. He starts worrying and looks around for her. Meanwhile, Hans and Elizabeth drink a lot of wine and then start dancing. The dance brings them closer to each other. Elizabeth asks Hans if there is a girl waiting for him at home. Hans smiles and says that only his mother is waiting for him at home. He then tells her that his father was a fisherman but drowned in the sea one day. Out of fear, his mother sent him away to work because she didn't want him to become a fisherman. Elizabeth sadly says that her mother had died before she was even born. Just then, Knudsen arrives looking for them and tells Elizabeth to come with him. But by now, love had already blossomed between them. Before she leaves, Hans gives Elizabeth the painting of his house and tells her that she can come to his home whenever she wishes. Then Hans takes his cow and continues toward his destination. He sits under a tree to rest for a while. After walking some distance, he begins to feel thirsty. When he looks at his water bottle, it's empty. Then an idea strikes him. He thinks he can quench his thirst by milking the cow. He tries his best but cannot get any milk out. Suddenly, the cow kicks him hard and he faints on the spot. When he opens his eyes, a little piglet comes near him and starts tickling him. Then the owner of the pig comes looking for it and gives Hans some water to drink. Hans tells him that he bought the cow for milk, but it no longer gives any and is now of no use to him. The man tells Hans that he wants to make a deal. He's willing to give his piglet in exchange for the cow, as the piglet is also of no use to him. Hans agrees to the trade, and they exchange the animals. After that, Hans continues his journey carrying the piglet. Elizabeth and Knudsen have already set out with their goods. On the way, Knudsen advises Elizabeth to keep her distance from Hans. He says that the boy is a bit strange and shouldn't be trusted too much. Meanwhile, one of the wheels of their carriage breaks, and they get stuck there. On the other hand, Hans is walking with his piglet when his foot slips on a rocky path, and he tumbles down a slope. Just then, a man carrying a goose approaches and helps him up. Meanwhile, Knudsen angrily scolds the blacksmith, shouting that the wheel he made has broken again in just 6 months. Hearing this, Elizabeth tells the blacksmith that if he repairs the wheel properly this time, they will give him a share in their trade. Hearing that, the blacksmith admits his mistake and promises to make the wheel stronger. Then Elizabeth goes into the village for a short walk. Meanwhile, Hans walks along with the man who has the goose. Hans tells him that he got the piglet in exchange for a cow. Hearing this, greed awakens in the man's mind. He says that he has neither a house nor food but wants to make a deal. He will give Hans the goose in exchange for the piglet. Hans refuses at first, but then the man plays a trick. He says that a piglet just like this was stolen a few days ago from the village he came from, and if people catch Hans with it, they might accuse him of theft and send him to prison for a year. Hearing this, Hans becomes frightened. He thinks he might get into trouble. Scared, he agrees to the deal and exchanges the piglet for the goose. Meanwhile, as Elizabeth wanders through the village, she reaches a place where people are celebrating a child's birth. There, everyone is dancing, singing, and enjoying the festivities. Elizabeth can't resist joining in and starts dancing with them. Meanwhile, Hans continues walking with his goose, thinking how happy his mother will be when she sees it. On the way, he meets a man sharpening knives, a grindstone man. The man asks Hans where he got the goose. Hans tells the whole truth, how he traded the piglet for the goose, the cow for the pig, the horse for the cow, and first of all, the gold for the horse. Hearing all this, the grindstone man realizes that Hans is a simple, innocent boy who can be easily fooled. He tells Hans that he too can become a good grinder like him and live an easy life. Hearing this, Hans becomes happy and agrees to make a deal. The grindstone man gives him a heavy stone and says that with it, he can sharpen any knife. Hans gives him the goose and walks away carrying the stone. Meanwhile, at the celebration, Elizabeth learns that the village is running out of wine and that no new supply has arrived in days. Hearing this, an idea forms in her mind. She tells the hotel owner there that she has plenty of wine and can sell it to him at a low price. The hotel owner accepts her offer. Elizabeth quickly brings the wine, and the owner likes it so much that he buys all of it. Knudsen is very happy with his daughter's cleverness. Meanwhile, Hans gets tired of carrying the heavy stone and collapses on the way. Then he spots a well nearby. He quickly picks up the stone and goes to the well to drink water. On the other side, Elizabeth tells her father that they've sold all their goods and no longer need to travel further. She asks him to go to the seaside because she has never seen the sea before. Knudsen agrees, and the two set out toward the ocean. Hans reaches the well, places the stone down, and tries to draw water with the bucket. But accidentally, the heavy stone slips from his hands and falls straight into the well. Watching it sink, Hans's face drops, and he realizes that his 7 years of hard work have gone to waste in a moment. Now he has nothing left. After a few moments of sadness, he comforts himself and softly smiles, saying that now he is completely free. He no longer has to carry anything or worry about keeping anything safe. His heart feels light, and he thinks that perhaps he is the happiest man on earth. With these thoughts, Hans walks toward the sea. The calm waves and the fresh, salty air completely refresh his soul. Standing there, he breathes deeply, as if he has found a new meaning in life. Just then, Elizabeth also arrives there. They look into each other's eyes and smile, as if this moment is their greatest joy. And with that, this lovely story comes to an end. I'm just a hardworking creator, trying my best, pouring my heart and soul into every video. If you found even a little bit of value or joy in my work, please consider subscribing to my channel. That one small subscription means the world to me and gives me the strength to keep creating. I'd be so grateful. Thank you from the bottom of my heart.